The Specter locomotive of Chickamauga. In the quiet fields of Georgia, echoes of an ancient battle still seem to drift through the air. The deep thunder of cannons, the sharp cries of commands, and the steady pounding of hooves across uneven ground. Among these echoes, another presence is said to linger, a mystery spoken of for more than 100 years. The Specter locomotive of Chickamauga. Unlike the documented trains that once carried soldiers and supplies, this phantom machine appears without warning, its dark shape gliding along invisible rails that shimmer faintly before fading into nothingness. The historical setting is undeniable. The Battle of Chickamauga, fought in September 1863, was one of the most brutal conflicts of the Civil War, leaving countless dead or wounded and scattering entire divisions across the unforgiving terrain. Both Confederate and Union forces depended heavily on trains for the movement of troops, ammunition, and vital goods, yet amid the chaos, strange tales began to surface. Soldiers' journals, local reports, and later recollections spoke of a train unlike any other emerging on nights heavy with fog, its windows sometimes glowing, its body sometimes hidden in shadow, and always vanishing before dawn. Many wondered if it was only an illusion born of smoke, mist, and moonlight. Some historians propose that the confusion of wartime rail operations makes such sightings understandable. With temporary tracks, damaged lines, and the constant rush of supply movement, the conditions were perfect for creating ghostly illusions through light and haze. But witnesses described far more than tricks of perception. They spoke of a train that thundered over rails long removed, a whistle echoing through valleys unreachable by any engine, and the faint rhythmic clatter of wheels running over lines erased by time. As years passed, the stories multiplied. Residents of the region swore they had seen the phantom locomotive during dense fog, its lamps flickering as if passengers unseen filled its carriages before it vanished into darkness. Train historians have speculated that it could be connected to Confederate efforts to transport hidden treasure or vital cargo during retreat. Some believe it was a supply train abandoned or destroyed when the Union advanced, leaving behind no trace but rumor and memory. Perhaps this ghostly vision is a lingering echo of those desperate wartime movements, a spectral reminder of materials and men erased from the record. Other theories reach deeper. Could this ghost train be tied to lost Confederate gold or caches of supplies buried and never recovered, much like vanished wartime documents that disappeared into history? Could it instead represent something far more human, the restless spirits of those who died along the tracks, their energy bound to the iron paths that once defined their struggle? Researchers tracking reported sightings have noticed a pattern. The train manifests near old rail embankments and forgotten sightings once vital to Confederate logistics, never in untouched areas. It may not be a simple apparition, but an imprint of sorrow, memory, and conflict emerging where the past refuses silence. Eyewitness accounts, though impossible to verify, remain strikingly similar. Soldiers' memoirs and letters from civilians near the old lines speak of the same experience, a low vibration that builds like distant thunder, a whistle piercing through fog, and a sense of motion where no tracks exist. Paranormal researchers and historians alike have sought rational causes, atmospheric reflections, acoustic distortions, or mirages born of weather, yet none of these explanations fully account for the consistent details. In the absence of proof, the phantom locomotive exists somewhere between recorded history and timeless legend, a symbol of how war leaves its mark not only on memory but upon the very landscape itself. Today, standing upon the serene remnants of Chickamauga's fields, one could easily mistake the land for peaceful pasture. Trees now cover the old paths, and the rails have long since been torn away, yet the stories endure as though the ground itself remembers. The pulse of engines and the breath of steam. Perhaps some parts of history refuse to remain written, existing only in whispers and the rare fleeting experience of the unknown. The phantom train may never surrender its truth, but its continued tale forces reflection on what lies beyond perception. As the sun sets over the ridges and long shadows stretch across the field, one might still wonder whether the Specter locomotive is merely imagination or a trace of the past that will not fade, carrying the lost voices of war across the misty valleys of Chickamauga. The final hours of General Stonewall Jackson. From the silent mystery of the woman in the window, our journey through Civil War enigmas moves to the mist-covered hills of Virginia, where one of the most profound and haunting moments of the conflict unfolded. The final hours of General Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Imagine the early morning of May 2nd, 1863, near Chancellorsville, the battlefield veiled in thick fog, dew glistening on the grass, and cannon smoke drifting slowly through the pale light. Amid the confusion of shouting officers and the cries of the wounded, Jackson rode ahead of his men, his usual calm authority guiding him forward, a presence that had already become legendary. Yet what happened next would forever cloud his legacy with uncertainty and sorrow. It was his own men who fired the fatal shots, a cruel twist of fate in a war already marked by tragic misunderstanding. An arrow bullet struck his left arm and right hand, and he was quickly carried to a nearby field hospital. At first, his condition seemed to improve, but within days he was overcome not by his wounds but by pneumonia, which weakened him until Passed on May 10, 1863, historians agree on these details, yet the surrounding circumstances, his wounding, his care, and his final decline continue to raise unanswered questions. How could such a disciplined unit make such a devastating mistake? Were there failures in command, confusion in communication, or something more complex hidden within the chaos of war?
The terrain of Virginia itself played a role in this tragedy. The rugged hills, the narrow wooded paths, and the hastily arranged encampments created an atmosphere of confusion. Eyewitnesses described fog so thick that men could barely see a few yards ahead, a natural curtain that concealed movement and blurred friend from foe. Jackson's decision to ride forward into this haze placed him in grave danger.
Was this disaster simply a matter of poor visibility, or did it stem from a chain of errors so grave they defy explanation? The medical treatment Jackson received only deepens the mystery. His arm was amputated, a desperate attempt to save him, yet it exposed him to infection. Records from the time describe his care as adequate by 19th century standards, but modern interpretation raises doubts. Was pneumonia inevitable after such trauma, or did unsanitary tools and limited knowledge worsen his condition? Some researchers even consider the possibility of infection spread within the hospital tents themselves, but no conclusive evidence exists, leaving a fog of uncertainty as thick as the one that shrouded the battlefield. Beyond the medical and tactical questions lies the human dimension. Jackson was revered by his men, a symbol of resolve and divine purpose. His sudden loss struck a deep blow to Confederate morale, strategy, and faith. Could his survival have altered the outcome of the war? Was his death a preventable mistake or an unavoidable moment of fate? A harsh reminder that even the greatest commanders are not immune to the chaos they try to control. Such reflections blur the line between history and destiny, leaving us to ponder whether his fall was written by error, chance, or inevitability. Rumors from the time spoke in hushed tones of betrayal and espionage, whispers of internal divisions among Confederate officers. Others saw symbolism in his passing, interpreting it as a sign of the Confederacy's coming decline. These theories, though unverified, reveal how deeply Jackson's death became embedded in myth, a story not just of loss but of prophecy and meaning beyond the battlefield. His name grew into legend, his memory enshrined in statues, memoirs, and pilgrimages, yet none of these memorials can dissolve the uncertainty surrounding his final week. Today the fields of Chancellorsville are quiet. The same hills that once echoed with musket fire are now carrying only the sound of wind through the trees. Visitors can still trace the paths he rode and stand where the field hospitals once stood, reading the words of those who witnessed his fall. Modern minds still wonder whether better medicine, clearer orders, or stronger coordination might have saved him. What might have come to light if his personal documents or battlefield instructions had survived untouched? Even now, more than a century and a half later, the land itself seems to hold its silence, guarding whatever truths remain about the final hours of the man who became both a symbol of brilliance and a victim of fate.
Stonewall Jackson's death endures not as a mere entry in history but as a lasting question, a reflection on the fragility of leadership and the unpredictability of war. In the calm that followed the battle, beneath the fading mist and the lingering echo of memory, we are left to ask what truths of that day remain hidden, waiting for those who still seek to uncover the secrets left behind by the great and fallen general.